In the land of Canaan, in the line of Abraham and Isaac, twins were born to Isaac and Rebekah after many years of waiting. Before they were born, the Lord told Rebekah that 2 nations were in her womb and that the older would serve the younger. When the time came, the first baby came out red and hairy, and they named him Esau. The second came out holding onto Esau's heel, and they named him Jacob. As the boys grew, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open fields. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed the wild game he brought home. Jacob, however, was quiet and stayed among the tents. Rebekah loved Jacob. One day, Esau came in from the field exhausted and hungry. Jacob was cooking stew. Esau begged for some. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright first." The birthright was not a small thing. It meant leadership of the family and a double portion of inheritance. But Esau, driven by hunger and impulse, swore an oath and sold his birthright to Jacob for bread and lentil stew. So Esau despised his birthright. Years later, when Isaac was old and his eyes were weak, he called Esau and told him to hunt game and prepare a meal so that he might give him his blessing before he died. Rebekah overheard and quickly instructed Jacob to bring her 2 young goats. She prepared a meal just the way Isaac liked it. She dressed Jacob in Esau's clothes and covered his hands and neck with goat skins so he would feel hairy like his brother. Jacob went in to his father. Isaac was suspicious because the voice was Jacob's, but the hands felt like Esau's. After touching him and smelling his clothes, Isaac blessed him, giving him prosperity, authority over nations, and lordship over his brothers. As soon as Jacob left, Esau returned. When Isaac realized he had been deceived, he trembled violently. Esau cried out in anguish and begged for a blessing. Isaac told him that Jacob would rule over him, though one day he would break free. Esau wept bitterly and began to plan to kill Jacob after their father's death. Rebekah learned of this and told Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran until Esau's anger cooled. Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. One night, as he slept with a stone for a pillow, he dreamed of a stairway reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. Above it stood the Lord, who repeated the promises given to Abraham and Isaac. The land would belong to Jacob and his descendants, and through his offspring all nations of the earth would be blessed. When Jacob awoke, he was afraid and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He set up the stone as a pillar, poured oil on it, and called the place Bethel. He vowed that if God would be with him and bring him back safely, then the Lord would be his God. When Jacob arrived in Haran, he met shepherds at a well and learned that Laban, his uncle, lived there. Soon Rachel, Laban's daughter, came with her father's sheep. Jacob rolled the stone away from the well and watered the flock. He wept aloud and told Rachel who he was. Laban welcomed him warmly. Jacob fell deeply in love with Rachel and agreed to work 7 years for Laban in exchange for her hand in marriage. The 7 years seemed like only a few days because of his love for her. But on the wedding night, Laban deceived Jacob. Instead of Rachel, he gave him Leah, the older daughter. In the morning, Jacob discovered the deception. Laban explained that it was not their custom to marry off the younger before the older. He told Jacob to finish the bridal week and then he could marry Rachel too in return for another 7 years of work. Jacob agreed. He married Rachel, whom he loved more than Leah, and served Laban another 7 years. Leah bore sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, however, was barren and envied her sister. She gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali. Leah, seeing she had stopped having children, gave her servant Zilpah, who bore Gad and Asher. Later, Leah bore Issachar and Zebulun, and a daughter named Dinah. Finally, God remembered Rachel, and she gave birth to Joseph. After many years, Jacob desired to return to his homeland. Laban asked him to stay because he had prospered greatly because of Jacob. They agreed that Jacob's wages would be the speckled and spotted animals of the flock. Through careful breeding, the flocks increased greatly in Jacob's favor. Over time, Laban's sons became jealous, and Laban's attitude toward Jacob changed. The Lord told Jacob to return to the land of his fathers. Jacob secretly gathered his wives, children, and possessions and left. Rachel took her father's household idols without telling Jacob. Laban pursued them and caught up with them in the hill country of Gilead. But God warned Laban in a dream not to say anything good or bad to Jacob. Laban confronted Jacob about leaving secretly and about the stolen idols. Jacob, not knowing Rachel had taken them, declared that anyone found with the idols would not live. Rachel hid them in her camel's saddle and sat on them, claiming she could not rise because of her monthly period. Laban searched but did not find them. Jacob rebuked Laban for his mistreatment over the years. Finally, they made a covenant and set up a heap of stones as a witness between them. As Jacob journeyed on, he learned that Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. Fear gripped him. He divided his people and flocks into groups, hoping that if one group were attacked, the other might escape. He prayed earnestly to the God of his fathers, reminding him of his promises and confessing his unworthiness. He sent gifts ahead to Esau to appease him. That night, after sending his family across the Jabbok River, Jacob remained alone. A man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw he could not overpower Jacob, he touched Jacob's hip so that it was wrenched. Still, Jacob refused to let go unless he was blessed. The man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob called the place Peniel, saying he had seen God face to face, yet his life was spared. From that day on, he walked with a limp. The next morning, Jacob went ahead of his family and bowed down 7 times as he approached Esau. But instead of attacking him, Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. They wept together. Jacob urged Esau to accept the gifts he had sent, saying, "To see your face is like seeing the face of God." Though Esau offered to travel together, Jacob journeyed on at his own pace. Later, tragedy struck when Dinah was violated by Shechem, a local ruler's son. In anger, Jacob's son Simeon and Levi deceived the men of the city and killed them in revenge. Jacob rebuked them, fearing retaliation from surrounding peoples. God told Jacob to return to Bethel. There, he built an altar, and God reaffirmed his name Israel and the covenant promises. As they journeyed on, Rachel went into labor and died, giving birth to her second son, whom she named Benoni. Son of my sorrow, Jacob renamed him Benjamin. Rachel was buried near Bethlehem. Years passed, and Jacob's family grew. He loved Joseph more than his other sons because he was born to him in his old age. He gave Joseph a richly ornamented robe. Joseph had dreams that suggested his brothers would bow down to him, and they hated him for it. One day, when Joseph went to check on his brothers in the fields, they plotted against him. Instead of killing him, they sold him to traders heading to Egypt and dipped his robe in goat's blood to deceive their father. When Jacob saw the blooded robe, he believed a wild animal had devoured Joseph. He mourned deeply and refused to be comforted. Years later, famine struck the land. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain, but he kept Benjamin with him. In Egypt, Joseph had risen to power under Pharaoh, though his brothers did not recognize him. He tested them and eventually revealed himself, weeping loudly and forgiving them. He told them to bring their father and families to Egypt, where there would be food. When Jacob learned that Joseph was alive, he could hardly believe it. But when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent, his spirit revived. He journeyed to Egypt with his entire household, about 70 people. On the way, God spoke to him in a vision, assuring him not to be afraid to go down to Egypt, promising to make him into a great nation there and to bring him back again. Jacob was reunited with Joseph, who embraced him and wept for a long time. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. Before his death, he blessed Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, crossing his hands to give the greater blessing to the younger, echoing his own story. He then called all his sons and spoke prophetically over each one, declaring what would happen in days to come. To Judah he gave a promise of leadership and kingship. Finally, Jacob gave instructions to be buried with his fathers in the cave of Machpelah in Canaan. Then he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph honored his father's wish and carried his body back to Canaan for burial. Jacob's life was marked by struggle, deception, fear, love, loss, and transformation. From a man who grasped his brother's heel and schemed for blessing, he became Israel, the father of a nation. Through his 12 sons, the tribes of Israel were born, and through his line, the promises of God continued unfolding across generations.